The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spent a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dan started coming to you and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha, everyone. I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont from a nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, November 7th, 2024. It's pretty quiet on our usual volcanoes of Kilauea and Mauna Loa, but we did have a little activity offshore at Kamaʻehuakanaloa this last week. We'll talk about this week on our update. So Dane, how's your last week been?
Oh, been pretty good other than a spray paint can exploding in the garage on the car and all over everything. But besides that, it's been pretty good. In terms of the volcano, been giving us a chance to breathe and trying to stay dry as much as possible.
Yeah, it's been a wet one this last week. Yeah, and since our last update on Wednesday, we've had quite a bit of weather. So we will recap a little bit of that. It comes up in the signals as well. But anything you want to get into before we jump into our program today, Dan?
No, just a reminder, if anybody's got any questions, we're going to be doing 2 parts today. Update up front, and we got a special one, Mauna Loa in the back. So questions will be compartmentalized to those, so 2 segments.
Right, so that back half Mauna Loa segment will be a highlights edit of the Volcano Awareness Month talk by Frank Truesdale and Ingrid Johansson, which focuses a lot on the build-up to the Mauna Loa eruption, especially. Right, so that's what we're going to look at as we enter the anniversary month of that November 2022 eruption. So not quite eruption time yet, but we figured the build-up might be a good thing to focus on this week, and we'll have other anniversaries elsewhere around the island we'll talk about in the coming weeks too. All right, so yeah, thanks Dan for leading that on the chat, and that all said, I will rearrange our screen here and get us set up for our summary. All right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for November 7th, 2024. It's been quiet on Kilauea and Mauna Loa this past week, but there has been an earthquake swarm at Kamaʻehuakanaloa, a volcano formerly known as Lōʻihi offshore. This lasted from November 1st to the 5th, about 110 earthquakes in total in that area, all in a shallower zone of the crust there within the volcano. So likely attributed to magma movement. And this earthquake plot is colored by depth, just so you realize what's going on here. So this is the whole last week. And from there, we can share that the USGS has released an update on that volcano today and saying that the activity is essentially over there. The largest event was a magnitude 4.3 that occurred on November 2nd at a depth of 3.5 miles below sea level. What's interesting is if you note the one time that we have a confirmed eruption of that volcano was in 1996. And that sequence included more than 4,000 earthquakes with 95 events larger than magnitude 4, the largest one being magnitude 5 in that case. So that's the benchmark right there. You're looking at something about 100-ish events over magnitude 4, then you're looking at possible eruptions. So what we're seeing is likely just a more minor movement of magma within a volcano. So that's the unusual thing for this week. On Kilauea, earthquake counts have been fairly low compared to the ramp up earlier last month. And are distributed mostly in the upper east rift zone within the magma system, as well as within the caldera area to some degree. Quite a lot of flank activity happening. This is normal to see it at this rate, as well as pahala activity still ongoing over in the deeper colors over here. So pretty quiet still in Kilauea. In past weeks, we've seen lots of this area full of earthquakes as well, especially the recent eruption site right around here is notably empty this week. If we look at our tilt meters here at Sand Hill Station, that's detecting both a summit caldera signal and a south caldera signal. There seems to be slow inflation on both, although there is extra signal from a large earthquake as well as a rain signal that's coming in through in the last few days here, even back to the first of the month. In the mid-rift zone at the escape road, we're seeing a stabilization there, so perhaps a slow filling in that area. But further down rift, near the eruption site, it looks like there is no filling nor emptying happening in that area. And Pu'u crater itself is also still deflating, but showing all these various effects of rainfall on the ground tilt as well. On Mauna Loa, it's been even quieter. Here's our map of earthquakes for the past week. Only one dot's easily visible. There are quite a few others that are very small here in the surrounding areas. This is all part of the regular background for Mauna Loa as it continues to recover from the 2022 eruption. So here is depth versus time for the last month. So here are those small shallow earthquakes and the one deeper one directly beneath the summit. Part of the normal rates of Mauna Loa. Here is the last year earthquakes per week. So sometimes it comes up a little higher, but as you can see, we're well within the norm for the whole last year. And that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for this week. And we'll move on to our hazard summary now, which is still the VOG. The VOG is still our biggest hazard. So we'll turn to our VOG measurement and prediction project, VMAP, from the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And the forecast this week is not very exciting because we only have around 60 tons per day as a source from the summit of Kilauea. But even still, you see a little bit of yellow popping up at the low end of the threshold of where the VOG is predicted to blow around. So very little effect, but if so, maybe in upslope South Hawaii areas. However, if you are a sensitive person and you're closer by, especially in a national park, then follow that guidance for sure. All right, so that's our main hazard. Not a lot to talk about there, so we'll move on and we'll come to the earthquakes. And so here are the earthquakes for the last week. And here are plotted by time. So the most recent event as we currently speak is a 2.0 here on Kilauea. Prior, we had a 2.0 in the Pahala zone, which has been active as well recently. And activity here in Lōʻihi, formerly known as Lōʻihi, Kamaʻehuakanaloa volcano. Let me zoom into that, because when I do that, and when I have this little checkbox ticked over here, then it'll just show me the ones in this area. So the most recent one there was on the 5th at 1.9, and nothing has happened since. We can sort it by the largest. The largest event was a 4.3 over here. Next was a 4.0 down there, another 4.0 there, and 3.7, the largest events of that sequence there. So there it is, that little cluster of earthquakes. And it looks similar in this view as what's happening over Pahala, which is why I like to switch over to this other map that we showed you guys at the intro here, because then we can really see colored by depth that those earthquakes in Pahala coming up as blue are a little bit deeper than the ones over at Lōʻihi, Kamaʻehukanaloa. So that's the pattern offshore. We'll look into, just zoom in a little more briefly, but closely on Kilauea, and you can see that same pattern as our summary. There's not a whole lot of earthquakes visible here. This is the last 2 weeks I have plotted. So for the last 2 days, it's even less, just a little bit in the Upper East Rift, and not much happening elsewhere. Mauna Loa pretty quiet as well. So given that, we'll spend a little more time on our offshore earthquakes today. And I thought I would just start off with this webpage from the Hawaii Center for Volcanology. This is from the School of Earth and from UH Manoa, I believe. And it's an old webpage. Maybe not quite being updated. It goes back to 2017, when it's noting here earthquake swarm in 2017, and then back to 2005 and 2001, and in fact, goes back to the 1996 earthquake swarm, which is the one that marked that eruption. And the reason we know it was an eruption is because they deployed a submarine within a few weeks of it happening, and went down there, saw a new pit crater formed underwater, and saw what looked like some fresh flows as well. So since then, there have been other earthquake swarms, but none of them have reached that threshold. But so here, at this point in time, you can go back and you can see this happened before. It happened in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 70s, several years in a row in the 70s, back in here. And so maybe we're in one of these periods like this, and at some point there will be something like that happens that will herald an eruption, but that's not where we are today. So they actually note here 71, 72, 75, 1990, 1996 as the large swarms that occur there. They also note how the swarms are easier to detect now that they've done refinement on what they call the velocity model, like how fast they think the earthquake waves travel through the ground under the volcano. And ultimately, if it's hotter, the waves can move a little slower. And if you don't account for that, you end up with more dispersal in your model, and your earthquakes look like they're more spread out. Whereas if you do it with a new model, then they actually cluster more closely near the summit and western flank during that 1996 event right there. So now we have the benefit of that as well going into it. So that, 70s through 1996. After 1996, you see 2001, 2005, 2017. Right. Overall, this is one of the more recent USGS publications I'll talk about in a bit. But here's a map showing the outline of the area of earthquakes in the 70s, and the dashed line out there. 1996, that event that was an eruption was all in red. And in 2020, those are marked in X's right here. As you can see, maybe a slight little shift in the locations, but overall, fairly consistent in that area right around the summit right there of Kamaʻehuakanaloa. Right there, yeah, so pretty interesting to note that. There's been quite a lot put out by the USGS over the years, so I'm just not going to read through all of this, but let's first just talk about the name itself, since we have been referring to it as Lōʻihi for so long. Right, those were names that were described, that were chosen by Mary Kavena Pukui and Martha Hohu at Bishop Museum, and Dr. Gordon MacDonald of the USGS, that basically named it based on the physical characteristics of the seamounts. So Lōʻihi means long, and so that's the longest seamount they found. That's why I got that name. But after the fact, there has been more research done, and in particular, let's jump forward here to the map of earthquakes in the 2020s, 2021. But Ku'ule Kanahele of Edith Kanakaole Foundation has uncovered these, or highlighted these mele that describe Kamaʻehuakanaloa, an undersea volcano there. And so once that was brought to light, the name was proposed and adopted unanimously in July 2021. Right, so while we're at it, and since this is a common question in this article here, there are sometimes volcanoes that can cause explosions and tsunami from events underwater, like what happened in 2021 at Hunga, Tonga. But what they say here is that because Kamaʻehuakanaloa is currently too deep underwater, explosive interactions may occur, but it's unlikely. It's just too deep. It's over a half-mile deep at the top of the volcano right now. Also, because Hawaiian volcanoes have more fluid magma than Tonga, for example, they expect smaller eruptions than that catastrophic blast that occurred in January 2022. So that is just to recap the name, what that is and what that means. And now I'll go back to 1996 volcano watch here, when in August as a swarm is still winding down. Here is what the earthquake maps of the day looked like. There is that longer, more spread out, not quite so clustered map of earthquakes over then labeled Lōʻihi. And yeah, this goes through how they deploying the submarine and the Pisces to make dives on Lōʻihi. And that's when they would, by next article, hope to know the cause of it. In the next article, they announced they had actually saw a pit crater underwater. So that was pretty cool to see there. So 1996, we've highlighted that. That was the massive event. I'll just pick out some other releases from the USGS. Here's the 2006, because kind of a gap in the online archives, but here 2006, there's a 4.7 event over the volcano. We'll jump to 2012, 4.3 recorded there, caused another press release. Jump forward again, 2017, in June. Renewed activity noted. Look, there's an earthquake map of that month. So since end of February, all the way to maybe June. Let's keep going. Here is May 2020, when there actually was a information statement put out right there. At that point in time, more than 100 earthquakes, They didn't have any above magnitude 4 by the looks of it at that point in time, so maybe a little bit bigger this past week. Right, but there is that one. Let's go to 4.9 earthquake in December 2021 over Kamaʻehuakanaloa. Preceded by over 50 small earthquakes on the South Rift Zone over the previous 2 weeks to that event. 4.9. And let's go forward another one to what we just had this past week. So on Saturday, here is our status report issued by the USGS, where they note that there, at that point in time, had been over 70 earthquakes, began at 6 p.m. on Friday the 1st. 32 events greater than 2 and 2 events greater than 4 at that point in time, with the largest being 1 magnitude 4.3 event. Below the volcano summit. Only one felt report from the island of Hawaii. So not many of these, only one of them felt by one party on the island. So no impacts expected at that point in time, and that was the status report. However, today is actually the first Thursday of the month when USGS releases updates for all the volcanoes, including Kamaʻehuakanaloa. So we do have another update from today, this morning, in fact, that notes that activity waned on November 5th, and the total numbers ended up being 48 earthquakes greater than magnitude 2 and 1 event greater than magnitude 4. So maybe a couple of other ones got revised down, or maybe there's some not quite matching numbers there. So very few, though. It's definitely not what you saw in 2000 or about in 1996, more than 4,000, 300 large with magnitude 3, 95 in a 4 to 4.9 range, and there was also magnitude 5, I want to say was the largest event of the sequence. Maybe it's been reclassified as 4.9, but that's around where it is right there. They note the May 2020 swarm, more than 100 earthquakes there. They note how far below sea level the peak is, and that there are no working instruments on a volcano. So everything about the volcano is derived from land-based seismometers that are looking off to the side underwater there. So that is all the information we have there on the volcano. I will point out there is a paper with a nice figure that I'll show here. So this is seismicity and velocity structure of Lōʻihi submarine volcano in southeastern Hawaii. And this is because they actually deployed a series of ocean bottom seismometers around the volcano in the 2010, 2011 era. And there weren't a whole lot of earthquakes then, but they were still able to do an image of what they thought the crust and the speed of earthquake waves moving through the area looked like. So this is the most we have as far as a cross-section of what it might look like under Lōʻihi. There it is right there. And so this is to the south, away from Hawaii Island, and this is to the north towards Hawaii Island. So you actually see that the oceanic crust is depressed because the big volcanoes are weighing it down over in that direction over there, right? And when that happens, there is this underplating where the magma is getting pinned in there as well. So there's some interesting effects happening all through here. But what they can say is essentially there is the conduit of the plume, more or less there, right? So there's a deflection. And coming up, further up, where there are zones of melt, maybe in here, high velocity because of intrusions, solid volcanic rocks without a whole lot of bubbles in them. This is usually what that means. So things that it's cooled underground. And that's Mauna Loa deposits stuck in there in between all the eruptive stuff as well. So stuff that might be sliding off the volcano down the flank is also getting mixed in here as well. So there's a lot going on in here. You see they didn't get super shallow with it, but it's still interesting to note what structure there was visible there, right? It doesn't come from straight below and come up, right? We can see when we talk about that, the hotspot plume and how it deflects, and one part might go south to Lōʻihi, Kamaʻehukanaloa. Here it is evidenced in the seismic velocity profile that's been put out by these researchers who are, let's commit to the top here so you can see who deserves credit for this, which are Mers, Kaplan, Auerbach, and Thurber from Alaska Earthquake Center, Western Washington University in Bellingham, and University in Wisconsin, Madison as well. So yeah, and JGR in 2019. So to kind of wrap up this little excursion we've had, I thought I'd come over to the interactive earthquake browser here at Iris, and just play back the full catalog here. This is the little box around the volcano here. This goes back to 1970. So here's our little histogram in the corner right there. So that's going to be 1996 right there, and those are the 70s, other events. In the 90s there, and to the 2000s, the 2020s coming in over here. And so you're just going to see the overall, how it fits into the grand pattern of things here. All right, so let's see if I can get this larger, a little bit less, just one click, please. No. All right, we'll just do it like that. All right, so here we go. Let's animate them from the start, coming back through time. So there is that first swarm on the western flank in the 70s. Here comes the 80s. Here comes the 90s, 96. One big blob of ink. A little bit of a gap in the 20 teens. Here's 2020s and our most recent sequence. I can come back to our latest earthquakes map here, and let's put it back to the last 2 weeks. And within that context, here's how we look today. So not too unusual. We have had maybe a little bit on a higher number of counts and a higher magnitudes, but not nearly as high as we've seen in the past. Even in the 2020s, we had a 4.9. So that's all the earthquake talk for today. And with that, we'll switch to our Kilauea monitoring, where it's business as usual with a daily update from the USGS. No eruption, not a whole lot of deformation happening, minor in the Middle East rift zone there. Earthquake counts at background levels. Gas rates are still the 60 ton per day measurement from mid-September. Steaming from a recent eruption site, no SO2. Earthquake counts in the Middle East rift zone are low, no tremor, minor deformation from GPS and tote meters there. And they still say that geophysical data show magma continuing to move at a low rate from the summit to the Middle East rift zone, such that future intrusions and eruptions could occur with that continued magma supply. So there's really nothing else new here. That's just the standard, but that's the current prognosis. So we can look at some of the signals ourselves here. Kilauea tilt signals. At Wikahuna, we've seen this signal has been wacky. Something's wrong with it. We're zoomed way too far in, and we're not seeing real data. Looks like almost like electrical noise in there. So come past that one. There was our big giveaway in October that had gone wonky. And here is Kilauea. So Kilauea, I'm going to point out that on the first, by the first, we're having quite a lot of rain. So here you see the beginning of what looks like an inflationary trend, but that actually is a lot of that rain accumulation. Not sure what happened there with the, maybe a small pause and some draining, but then it kind of resumed raining and modifying the ground. So really a lot of the last week is suspect. Not quite as noticeable. Looks like there is an overall trend of inflation still present here in the summit area, South Caldera and the summit itself. I will point out here that in the summit area, this last week has had more inflation than there was over that second week before, right? So it's 2 weeks of inflation now since about the 26th or so. But prior to that, there was about a week of what looked like a deflationary trend as well. And I'll come back to that. It will become relevant in something else I show. So on the East Rift, the escape road, we mentioned before, this one, what normal is down is for it to trend down a little more. So when it stays steadier, I mean, something's affecting it, right? This one itself here is also a little steadier. So maybe there's something going on there. I'm not sure how much effect the rain and magma are both having an effect in here, but there's some mix of it going on there. This is an area near where we still see earthquakes in the Middle East Rift, so it wouldn't be unheard of to have magma filling nearby and affecting the signals there. But over at Pool, the overall trend is that of deflation from near that site. So we saw that the signal that points west was picking up pulses of inflation, like right there, when we had our most recent INSAR image showing uplift in that recent eruption site area. We're actually a little bit west of there, yeah. But since then, it's been fairly stable, fairly steady. If anything is moving, it's not very much over there. Some of our other tilt meters, we saw something unusual happening at Jonica. I'm not sure what, but since it's not related to any other magmatic signal, we were confident it was not magma. But interesting to note that when these rains started around the 1st, that signal seems to have reversed, and we'll see what happens next there. It seems to be very sensitive to small effects at this point in time, that station down there. All right, so yeah, and then further down at the coast, there's some funny stuff happening as well. We noticed some maybe movement of the flank and maybe a little bit of extra rainfall detected on that tilt meter as well there. So that's our tilt. Our earthquake counts per day for the last week, pretty average here, in the range of 40 to 70. Nothing really that unusual. Depth versus time for the last week, kind of steady at the deep Pahala zone and similarly steady in the shallow zone as well. No, not a whole lot of clustering that's unnatural here. So there's a map as we pointed out earlier in our summary. Let's keep moving past that. And cross-section, how those look. If you haven't seen this before, this is the easiest way to show the scale of the coloration of the dots to me, right? The blue ones are all deep. The yellow ones are all in that band, and the orange ones are all here. So that's what they essentially mean with depth. Wikahuna is wonky, as we mentioned. There's our Sand Hill. Earthquakes over time. There's where we can see our most recent earthquakes post for the last month. So this was a couple of weeks ago. And here we are more in this steady, slower state. Like everything seems to be in balance where there's not a whole lot of earthquakes happening, even if we can continue to fill that storage zone of the volcano. So there's a last month, a clear increase, and later October. And over the last year, that shows up as a higher earthquake week. That's now 2 weeks ago from our still very low earthquakes per week count we currently see. Over the last 5 years, there's been a little bit of a slowdown here, and that is because we actually have had a chance to erupt and relieve some of that pressure there. So we'll see how long it takes to recover. And that's really where we are, is the recovery from that most recent eruption. And that's why I can do it without quaking as much, without as much ground tilt. And stuff is still moving and filling and adjusting and all of that, but it's not doing it with quite the same intensity. Right? It's able to accommodate because it was just swollen, relieved some pressure, and now it can swell again to maybe close to where it was. And so it's got some give. So that's the signals we have on Kilauea. The GPS is still out, updating to this website here, so we'll let that be for today. We do have one image from the mounts system. This is the automatic satellite aperture radar generator here, just from that small area of the summit. And here in Kilauea Summit, through the 30th, the 12 days prior, and here's why I pointed out that tilt signal, because from the 30th, for the 12 days prior, right here, what you catch mostly is deflation. And correspondingly, what you see here is a deflation signal of the area and of Halemaʻama'u pit itself as well. So that is the monitoring data we have. Our visuals on the recent eruption site. This is the S2 cam. Not a whole lot of steam even there. A little bit of gas right in there maybe, but pretty quiet out there. Not a lot to see on Kilauea as far as moving lava, moving steam. The other spot we're still seeing steaming here is that pit of Halemaʻama'u that's got this hardened lava crust over top and gas still leaking out through it. That's causing minerals that are sulfurous and yellow to accumulate in this ring around this original central cap of the lava lake. So that's where we are at present on Kilauea. Those are our observations visually. Not a lot we can share of them today, but there they are. And with that, we'll jump next to Mauna Loa. And on Mauna Loa, we have the benefit of an update today as well. We are still at alert level normal, aviation code green. Seismicity has been low over the last month, 61 earthquakes, mostly below magnitude 1.5, which is expected for the post-eruption phase of this volcano. 5 earthquakes approximately deeper than 8 miles or 10 kilometers. No change near the summit on GPS, and no unusual gas or temperatures either. So that's the story on Mauna Loa. And while we're on this update, the same is true. No activity at Kīlauea, Haleakala, Mauna Kea. We discussed Kamaʻehukanaloa where there was a change, and that is that full other volcanoes update that's monthly from the USGS here. So for their signals, here's the last month. Not clear how much there is weather signal here going on, but there's certainly something going on with the signals up there. There's a couple interesting little jumps there. But whatever is happening there, it's happening without any earthquakes at that same corresponding time, and nothing really obvious to indicate that these are volcanic signals, in fact. So there are earthquakes depth over time, low level, sporadic, crustal earthquakes there, and occasional deeper ones here in blue and purple. Rates very low per day still. This is 10. So for our last week, our high has been 4 in that summit area. For the last year, earthquakes per week, we're still below 5 currently, but last week was below 15. And we go to earthquakes per month. This was the buildup to Mauna Loa, so there is back to 2019, fairly high rates. A bit of a ramp up that occurred here in 2021, then back down again, and then really September 2022 when it ramps up to get really intense by November, one eruption does occur, and then by December it drops back off and tails off to the recovery phase. And so you can see there was an initial slightly more robust recharge phase there, and now we're in a lower gear even than that with our recharge of Mauna Loa as far as earthquake rates. So here we are at less than 100 earthquakes per month by the looks of it here for much of the year, if not all of the year. Now that's how they look. Earthquakes for the last week, month, and year. Takes really the whole year to see much of anything, and then not a whole lot of pattern, just the background kind of all over the place, and not a whole lot of clustering there. Our GPS is still off, but this is what they mean by not a lot of change. So I'm curious to see if this is actually flattened or if it's continuing going up here. But in any case, it's not very significant. If you look at the big scale here. And upwards have been flattening a little more too. So that is Mauna Loa. And to round off our first half here, we'll touch base on Volcano Watch. And that is a couple of articles since last week we went early due to the Halloween holiday. So last week's Volcano Watch from October 31st is on tilt meters, how they help us monitor activity. And this goes through and talks about tilt meters. So I just thought I'd show the image at least. But this is posted online on our website and elsewhere. I won't go through it in too much detail. We talk about tilt meters a lot here. We have the one from today, the Art and Science of Geologic Mapping, also posted everywhere, November 7th. Right? Or different kinds of map, island-wide map, eruption-specific map, highlighting different kinds of data. Interesting article here. So check this out. Also posted everywhere. Won't go through it either, but there it is in Volcano Watch. And the last thing I'll mention here in this segment is that along these lines, there has been an update of the USGS publication, Eruptions of Hawaiian Volcanoes, Past, Present, and Future. This is the general information product. Oh, I want to say, what is it, 117? If that means anything to anyone. They first produced it back in 1987, at the time that they first published paper 1350. They revised it in 2010, second edition, to commemorate the centennial of HVO, which was January 2012. And now here is the third version, which since 2012, we've had a lot happen, right? The conclusion of the summit phase of of Kilauea, a whole new summit phase of Kilauea, the end of the Pu'o'o phase, a whole eruption in lower Puna. All of that is now in here. Mauna Loa eruptions of 2022, also now in here. New cover on a document here. There it is once again, right? And it's from here that if I can jump to page 59, where I pulled this image of the earthquakes of Kamaʻehuakanaloa, as you can see, correctly labeled since the renaming in 2021. All right, so I will pass it to Lou and Day now to do our mid-roll community segment.
All right, thank you, Phil. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get through it. I'll add Lou on here, and we'll catch you in a minute. All right. Hey, Lou, how's it going?
Hey, going good, going
Yeah, we
good.
got a little bit of community corner stuff to go through, huh?
Yeah, it's quite a list today. I was surprised going through things during the beginning of the week, how much activity.
And we were adding stuff up till right until the stream started too.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
right up to it.
The park had talked for the last several months about so many things closing because of construction. There's more construction and there's more activity that I didn't expect. So let's go through it. This is a picture I found. This is up on Mauna Loa, since we're talking Mauna Loa this month. This is about 11,000 feet up. Thought that was a nice picture. Let's look at the alerts and conditions for the park. Mauna Loa Road is going to have a lot of service being done on there, doing surveys. The sulfur banks are still closed. The Powell Crater and Campground are closed. And, you know, the construction that's going on up there. I pulled this up so give a little bit easier way of looking at things. You can see everything's pretty much open for driving, but the temporary closure for 6 weeks, starting from November 4th, is the Mauna Loa Road. There is access in the morning and afternoon, just not during work hours. So the closure will start at gate from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday due to large trailer mounted drill rig and heavy machinery that will dominate the narrow road. The road will open on weekends and holidays to all users, including November 11th for Veterans Day and November 27th through Thanksgiving weekend until work resumes the following Monday.
So it's not like just closed the entire time. They're going to have partial openings and reopening for days. Yeah, cool.
This is the best time to be up there. The weather's a little cooler, and it's just a beautiful hike. So there it is. Temporary closure of Mauna Loa Road is expected to last through mid-December. Visit the park website for additional temporary construction-related closures. I should also note that this is not the Mauna Loa Road that goes to the observatory off of Saddle Road.
Right.
This is the other side.
Up by Bird Park, yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Right.
Again, park staff will be replacing the aging wooden boardwalk at Sulphur Banks to improve visitor safety, and repairs scheduled from October 21st through December 12th. And the Keiki Museum has something going on to celebrate the start of whale migration season here in the islands. We're excited to announce a special guest visitor return to our museum. Kama'akai is a walk-through inflatable life-sized whale free admission. They'll be open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Saturday and Sunday only. I wish we had this on our side of the island. Dane, I would pick you up and drive you myself to go do this one. Saturday, November 9th and 10th.
I've been hearing reports about whales being spotted already.
Right? It is. It's time.
Reports trying to trickle in that they showed up a little early this year.
And last year last year we had a good whale season. So we'll see what happens this year, especially if they're already a little bit early. County of Hawaii has a hazard mitigation plan. The County of Hawaii is updating its hazard mitigation plan in line with federal requirements under the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, aimed at creating a consistent approach to reducing risks from natural hazards and improving grant funding eligibility. Officials are encouraging residents to share their input on the plan's priorities by participating in the 2025 public survey. In-person sessions are scheduled for November 18th at the Hilo Emergency Operations Center and November 20th at the West Hawaii Civic Center in Kailua Kona, both starting at 5. I have this link and anything else that you say link in the description. It will be down there. It's easier than putting up a QR code for you. You can always check back. So look in the link below if you're interested in any of these. Highway 137 has an informational meeting. It's a Zoom call find out what's going on there. Dane, you know more about this than I do. It's probably update on where they're at on the road.
Yeah, I think it'd be an update about where they are and the projected completion date. They might have run into some things as well. We've always talked about there being trapped heat down there, and they start ripping up, getting down, that they might uncover some of that and get quite hot. It can take some time to cool off, and that creates delays in your project. So
Yeah.
Don't know if that's what's happening, but that happened last time, and would not be, surprising to see something like that repeat, because it still is that jelly donut we talked about. You got to dig a little bit deeper now,
right,
to be able to get the hot stuff, but it's still there.
It's there. Yeah, last time I was down there was for the blessing, and they had gone up and over the lip or the edge there. That's about as far as I could see. I didn't walk all the way in there. So this will be interesting.
They're basically punched all the way through 137 at this point.
Oh, that's incredible. Good for them.
Yeah. Then it's all the other stuff that they're working on now, right? Not just that forward trail, but widening and moving the grades and all those things. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. Friday the 15th of November at 12 noon. So get your, or let's say scan for your Zoom link. There we go. Okay, check this out. Another event at the Kahuku unit. Delbert Anderson Quartet, artist in resident at the Kahuku unit. And Hawaii Volcanoes National Park hosts a special event concert featuring the Delbert Anderson Quartet blending Dine. It's a Navajo word, I guess. Spinning songs with jazz and funk. Trumpeter Delbert Anderson, joined by Robert Mueller, Mike McCullen, and Khalil Brown, creates a musical experience that both educational and entertaining, celebrating cultural heritage and inviting audiences to dance. Don't miss this unique opportunity. Don't miss this unique performance. An hour from the Kilauea Visitor Center near mile marker 70.5 on Highway 11. What's this? The third or fourth presentation they've had down there now since they were closing up the auditorium. They've been adding up.
Yeah.
Check it out. It is free. It's November 9th at 2 p.m. Duration is an hour. There's some more stuff going on at the Kahuku site. The Kahuku Site Management Plan Story Map. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is crafting a site management plan for the Kahuku unit covering diverse habitats and cultural sites. This is a story map on their website. I have that link down there below. It's a really cool interactive map. You can scroll down and start showing what's going to be happening on all the different areas. That's a screenshot I just took of it, so you can see how they have the map laid out. And as you scroll, the project overview changes. And if you missed our newsletter, you're not on our list. There's a link in the chat. And there's
a back to the Highway 137. Sorry, real quick.
Yeah. Back to 137.
You have to sign up. Yeah, you have to sign up for this one, and it's a Zoom meeting. And in order to sign up, you would fill out this Google Documents form that the county has.
Oh, I see. You just dropped that link in the chat.
Yeah. Just drop that one in the chat for people.
Perfect.
All right. Sorry. Newsletter.
That's all right. No, that was good. We need that. And there's our newsletter QR code. One last shot to scan it. If you haven't, the link is in the chat as well. And if you're looking for more ways to follow us, we do put all the same information across all of our platforms, so you don't have to be signed up for all of them, at least one of them. And it is the beginning of our end of year fundraiser. It's our kickoff today. Between now and December 3rd, 5th, right around that last week, we will be raising the last funds of the year to push us into next year. So please think about donating to us if you are looking for that next or last tax deduction. You're a business or a person, you need it. You can get a tax deduction by donating to us. And there you go, Dane. There's our survey.
All right. Well, yeah. So this is we're running our 2024 HVERI impact survey just to figure out how effective this type of communication and this type of information sharing is, as well as general preparedness. We have a few other things in there. Should take about 5 minutes. Multiple, just easy answers. Select you're comfortable. How comfortable are you? Things like that. It really helps us out to be able to fill this out. So we encourage you, if you haven't taken it already, we know we've been pushing it, and we thank those that have taken the time to fill this out and make it one last push to try and get any stragglers that are out there to go ahead and fill it out. So we appreciate that. Anybody that's taking the time to help us there.
Right on.
Also like to thank the County of Hawaii and the Hawaii Community Foundation for supporting this type of work. Their contributions through the Kilauea recovery, as well as the Puna Strong 3, really help this program have a reliable source of backing to be able to provide this type of content, as well as our other programs and our digital resilience, as well as our youth development. So we thank the County of Hawaii and Hawaii Community Foundation, as well as many of the donors that are here tonight. So
yep. You know what, real quick, I'm going to jump in there before you keep moving, and I'll run the mid-roll. Buster Brown's asking, if we donated to you, will we get a tax form at the end of tax year?
I believe the answer is yes for that. Especially, it's required for donations over cumulative donations over $250.
That's right. If you need more information about that, contact us at contact@hveri.org, and we'll get you the paperwork that you need, the receipt that you need.
Yep. All right. Go ahead and jump in. And we did have some donations come through as well. So thank everybody that's donated so far. We also have through Scott J. Ed with a $5 super chat, says, better be a good one. Lou ended up making a poll for 5 people donate through super chats, then I have to answer the question. So that was a 5 towards that. And then Susan with a $5 mahalo there. And then Josh came through with a big donation of $199.99. Thanks for all you do. Thank you, Josh, for that. And yeah, we appreciate everybody.
Yeah, and we still have 2 more for the bullseye to be hit. I'll just say that. And I'm also like to throw in a couple other donations that's already come through. And Bill Brennan, $52. Paula Day at $104. Ed, $50. Julianne with $104. Mary Minor at $260, as well as Dane himself donated $1. And that doesn't count towards the bullseye, though. We still need 2 more for the bullseye to be hit. Sorry, the bullseye is strictly YouTube. Oh, there's number 4, Buster Brown with the $5. Going to make you reveal your favorite food truck. That's right.
Thank you.
Right on, guys.
All right. And yeah, I think we can go ahead and move into some questions and answers, Phil, if that's cool with you back there. And thanks for jumping on here, Lou.
Go ahead, slide me up.
There we go. Had to fix the arrangement. So yeah, we do have some questions here, Phil, if you're ready for those. You are muted, by the way. So first question, Cecil asks, any thoughts on the Laki Laki event? Dramatic? Is there any possibility of that on the Big Island? I assume that they're referring to as explosive activity.
Yeah, Mount Lewatobi Laki Laki in Indonesia, spewing tall column of ash. Looks like what, 5 miles high into the air,
8,000 meters.
8 kilometers tall in the air.
Yeah.
So yeah, an explosive eruption. That's that kind of volcano that's more explosive than Hawaiian volcanoes because the magma chemistry has more silica in it, and that prevents the gases from being able to escape it so easily. So the bubbles end up being trapped. You can build more gas pressure within the volcano. It causes more explosive eruptions, and that comes down to the actual chemistry of the magma itself, right, and how it interacts with the gas. And so because we have a different kind of magma here, it doesn't do that. It's too, when we look at Kilauea, when I think of the 2008 to 2018 era of Hale Ma'u lava lake that was there most all the time, maybe 2012 to 2018, and that thing was put out gas kind of continuously. It wasn't like it was just like a continual rolling fume. It wasn't like a smoke signal where sometimes you see these stratovolcanoes, they put out a little puff and then you see a pause or a gap, and then another puff, right? Because that's the nature of how the gas collects and escapes. It comes out through bigger bubbles. It's just like our experiments we run with for the kids' day, and we have bottles of corn syrup and bottles of vinegar, and and she can bring one of those up to show sometime. But it comes down to the actual chemistry of the magma itself, right? So that's the main thing, and that's why we're not afraid of that kind of thing happening from Kamaʻehuakanaloa nearby here.
All right.
A
Next
good question. Great question.
Yeah. Next question is from Yvonne, who asks, my question regarding the Kamaʻehuakanaloa, how do you figure out if it has an eruption? Nearby land-based seismographs can track regular earthquakes, but probably not harmonic tremor. And goes on just about the difficulties about trying to figure it out. So how would we track to see if it has erupted? How would we say? How do we know?
Yeah, not easily. I mean, you're right on, Yvonne. That's basically it, right? I mean, what did it take in 1996? Get in a submarine, go down there and look.
Right. The one I was wondering about, and I've asked you about before, is could you use the photoplankton, like some kind of trace on that, and you start to see a bloom, even if it's dissipated, and therefore the only source could be there was an eruption or something extrapolated off of that. But I haven't heard of anybody ever talk about that kind of idea, or if even
potentially
too deep type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, so when they deployed a submarine in 1996 following that eruption, that did tow what they call a yoto, right? It's like a yo-yo, but they tow. So like it goes behind it, but it goes up and down, and they measure what's in the water column all across, and they were picking up that kind of like what would dissolved gases or other kind of effects as well. So you definitely could do that, but I'm not sure. Maybe we catch it by satellite nowadays where you couldn't before. Right. I don't know.
That might be a way, something in the future. The photoplankton creates a certain signature. If you hit it with this aperture, it's a satellite, then it illuminates in pieces, and therefore you can make an assumption. But yeah, we really don't got that much right now.
Yeah, and it might be different with those down there, right? So there's the actual bio bloom, and then there's the actual gas getting into the water as well, right? So there's two different things there, and the actual particles that if you were going to have a fountain, then all of that little silt-sized debris could actually float around in the ocean, right? But the thing's happening, 0.6 of a mile underwater. So like even would you see anything? I mean, you might not. It might be
yeah.
You might not know anything, right? So I mean, it really comes down to if you were to have a sequence like 1996 again, right? Would you see something additional in today's instrumentation than they saw 30 years ago, right? That's and then if you might not, and you might have to go in a submarine again still. So yeah, it's a great question, great thing to think about, Yvonne, and yeah, we can all think about it together a little bit now as we talk about it. And yeah, there's no great answer from me there. Maybe, right? We can go back to what we saw on our talk about American Samoa when we detected earthquakes happening underwater through the hydrophones. Maybe some hydrophones might pick something up if they're underwater. I don't know, right?
So deep too. That's just the thing, is it's not like it's a trivial amount of water that it's under.
Yeah. So I think the sound's got a chance. Because the sound can travel quite well through the water column there, right? That's why they use a sonar, right? And I saw another question that Yvonne had about the LiDAR, right? And and that's what it comes down to is you have to, sound is what travels the best in the deep water where this thing is so deep. And the problem is then you can have a shape of the thing, and all you can do is compare it to the shape of the last time you did that and see the difference. And that's how you can see what's changed. And that's primarily how seamounts are monitored for the most part, unless you have the benefit of having an ocean bottom seismometer deployed, which there was at one point in time. At one point they actually had one wired running offshore the island all the way down to the seamount, but yeah, they had issues with that. So,
All right.
interesting.
Next one's from Chuck. Asks, do you think the underwater volcano's eruptions relieve some pressure on it? Let's just assume it did erupt for a second.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good question. Yeah, at first when I first saw this feature, they thought that maybe it was like maybe that's part of the southwest rift of Kilauea or something, right? But later on, they were able to sample the rocks from those eruptions from that volcano and documented differences in their chemical fingerprints from Kilauea. So there are different kind of magma down there. So there's a different path that comes up. So ultimately, no, not really. Although if you had a big enough eruption, you might affect the hotspot and pressure dynamics in some more subtle ways in a longer term, right? But it's not nearly so simple or straightforward as it could be. And the easiest way to think of it is no connection.
All right. One more. Sage Pup asks, I have a question. Can extra rainfall cause extra movement? I know it can cause geothermal vents to produce more steam.
Yes, yeah, absolutely can. Yeah, it certainly can. In a couple of ways, I mean, all that water has mass, so it actually adds weight to blocks of rock that might be moving along faults, for example. That's one thing that can happen. If the water can actually get into the fault plane itself, the actual slip surface in there, then it can actually not exactly lubricate, but also adds port pressure that helps almost like hydraulically lift faults and allow big blocks of rock above them to move. That kind of thing can happen too. But there has to be an overall force field acting on those blocks that also is present, right? So it's a combination of both things, right? You can have a block of rock that's got a fault in it and there's no pressure in it at all, and you can put a bunch of water in it. It's not going to change anything necessarily, right? But if you do have like a pressure where it wants to move and it's about to go, but it's not quite there, then maybe a little bit of extra pore pressure or a little bit of extra this or that maybe can change the dynamics, right? But water is super important in the rock faulting process overall. As when you study structural geology, it's one of the most important things you learn is the effect of hydrostatic pressure and all that. How that can change the whole force field around a rock and cause it to actually break, that kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
And we did hit our number, so here's Lou again for the thing you set up. Yeah.
Yep. We hit it. Yeah. I think that two from the same person maybe doesn't kick it. But yes, thank you everybody for donating and getting us to that goal. And we're going to do more of these. And I have been thinking about what types of questions I can put Dane on the spot for. So we'll have more of those in the future. So, but for now, Dane, would you like to reveal your favorite food truck on Hawaii Island?
Yeah, it's actually L&L. No, I'm kidding. It's Poncho's Tacos. Yeah. It's for sure. The Tuesdays, Wednesday, it's in Pahoa, and then they do Hilo on the other Thursday, Fridays. Those guys are great guys.
Did you all catch that? He's all Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Oh yeah.
Because I
do them 2 days in a row, and then I have the lunch on the third. Are you kidding?
Ponchos. I've been there many times with Dane. I have to agree. It's probably my favorite food truck as well. It's fantastic. The other one for me is the Lebanese food truck, which is right next to our office downtown. It's my orthopedics brother, so I like a good baba ganoush. But Poncho's by far number one. I'm with you on that one, Dane. So thank you again, everybody, for the challenge of hitting the bullseye tonight, and we'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, Luke. All right. That gets us through it, Phil.
All right. So we'll switch gears to our volcano awareness presentation. And this is a highlights clip. It's actually most of the talk, maybe some slight rearrangements in there and some accelerations here and there, but of the volcano awareness talk given by Frank Truesdell and Ingrid Johansson in January of this year. And as I recall, as I summarize at the top of our broadcast here, it's got a lot of the geophysical build up to the eruption that we were not seeing at the time. We saw the USGS mobilizing and planning their outreach events and increasing their messaging and changing their alert levels and all of that. And we knew that they were looking at something behind the scenes that we could not see at that time, right? But they've revealed all of this to us in Volcano Awareness Month this year by showing us the models that these were based on. And so there's that, and then there's also a little bit of the eruption itself as they talk through it. It turns out that since then that Frank Truesdell, Mr. Mauna Loa, has retired. So this may be pre-retirement, his last presentation on Mauna Loa. So not to say he won't do it again after retirement, but at least there is that first benchmark that we can point to here. So I didn't want to cut much of Frank, so it ended up being about a half an hour here. And anything else you want to add, Dane?
No, I mean, it was kind of the last formal talk from Frank Truesdale that at least we caught. Is that correct? So it's cool just to see him, in his element, talking about Mauna Loa right before it finally, goes off, type of thing. The long anticipated buildup for a lot of people, and it's just interesting to go back and hear Mr. Mauna Loa talk about it just before it happens. So yeah.
Yeah, and he mentions that in 1984, the last eruption of Mauna Loa, he was a junior member of the team then, and that was his basically intro into his career.
And then waits 30 years until it finally comes.
Eruption for the next one,
right.
And that's his outro.
Right.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, so without further ado, Frank Truesdale and Ingrid Johansson of the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. This is from January this year. And here it goes.
So let's look at the geologic context of Mauna Loa volcano. It's the largest active volcano on Earth. It's a high threat volcano as identified by the USGS Volcano Hazards Program. Comprises 51% of the surface area of the island of Hawaii, which means that even though you don't live on Mauna Loa, because the lava flows can impact the island, whether it's to the northwest, the west, Hilo, it has far-ranging impacts that impacts everybody on the island. Just imagine it cutting the highway, as was a potential in 2022. The previous eruption to 2022 was in 1984, and I actually was here as a junior person to work on that eruption, and it was fantastic. Okay, the events leading to the eruption, and this is Ingrid's.
All right. So this bottom panel down here goes from about 2002 up until right before the earthquake. So here in 2004, 2005, we saw this first big pulse of inflationary motion. It did eventually calm down. The alert level was put to yellow during this time period, but then it was brought back down to green. And we did reach what could really be considered background again after that pulse. But then in 2014, it started up again. And in 2014, there was a little bit of a difference, and that had to do with the seismicity. So the top panel here, this is the earthquake occurrence. So this is a histogram showing the number of earthquakes per month, also from 2002 until present. And during the inflation period here in the mid-2000s, it looks like a modest pulse of earthquakes. In fact, there were quite a few deeper earthquakes, but it was definitely a different pattern than what started up in 2014. In 2014, we started to see shallow earthquakes starting to occur around the summit area. And once things started in 2014, they never really went back to zero inflation. Starting here in 2014, this was when we really started talking about hazard with the community, Mauna Loa hazard in particular, because of these two changing together. And again, the color code was changed to yellow. There was a nice period where things really calmed down a little bit, and it was lucky because that was during 2018. They let us respond. Mauna Loa let us respond to Kilauea before really starting up again. There is a idea that there's a reverse correlation between eruptions at Mauna Loa and Kilauea. When one erupts, the other stops, and vice versa. The volcanoes do talk to each other through their pressure systems. So when Mauna Loa goes through a strong deflation, it actually relieves a bunch of stress off of Kilauea, and it means that Kilauea suddenly has a lot more space to expand into. So there's definitely a mechanism to have some anti-correlation like that, just through the pressure transfer between the two volcanoes.
Okay, so my perspective as a geologic mapper who can look into several thousand years of eruptive history is they're anti-correlated. So when Kilauea seems to be really active, effusive, meaning lava flows and the like, then Mauna Loa appears to be not dead, but quieter. And then when Kilauea moves out of that phase, Mauna Loa seems to have lots of eruptions. And we can show that back to 0, like as in BC, AD. We can go back that far and show.
So you have this long period of 10 years, and you start looking within that 10 years of when you should start to escalate your concern even further. And one of the signs we were really looking for was that evidence that the magma was getting even shallower. So here in 2021, one of the signs that activity was getting shallower was when we started to see clear signal on Mauna Loa's network of tilt meters. Tilt meters are in particular very sensitive to shallow changes in inflation. So they're more sensitive to shallow than GPS is. Those of you who look at Kilauea's tilt meters are probably familiar with seeing those respond all the time to what's going on at the volcano. The big difference between Mauna Loa and Kilauea was the depth of the magma chamber. The shallow Halemaumau chamber is at about a 1 kilometer depth. It's very shallow. So this was kind of a sign that things were coming into the depth range that we almost think of like Kilauea. So like everything was starting to get shallower. So this was the first sign. This is I say contraction because it's actually still a very intriguing event. I can't say I totally know what happened during this time period, but there was a decrease in line length across the summit, an increase in earthquakes, and then tilt that's usually in the deflationary direction, so inward tilt. It all happened together. All of these happening together really put the nail that this was a true volcanic signal in the tilt meter and not something else. So this was a really important sign that we should be on the watch for shallowing. Another way to watch for shallowing is through computer modeling. So ultimately, the geometry, you can see there's a line here. This is representing a dike-like tabular body, so almost like a wall of magma in the volcano. There's also a point source, which is really just a stand-in for some sort of equidimensional, slightly spherical source. And then this bigger rectangle is a décollement fault, not unlike the décollement fault underneath Kilauea. So this is a sliding surface between the volcanic pile and the original oceanic crust. And because I'm modeling years of data, it is important to keep that, that contributes as well. That's the model fit, so be impressed by how well it fits. But so for the model I'm going to show, so now we're looking into the volcano. So this is as if we were standing at Kilauea. You're looking into Mauna Loa. This dashed line is sea level. This is the ground surface. Mokuaweoweo goes from about there to there. And then the pit craters that make up the southern summit region are through here. So this is starting in 2014. So here's that viewpoint. This is smoothed in space and time. So you'll notice it's very smooth. So the color, the warm color indicates opening rate. So if it stays a steady color, it actually means it's continuing to open. As the color disappears, it's not closing. As the color disappears, it just means it's no longer opening. This was an interesting shift into this southern summit region that happened in 2016. It was actually that shift into that southern summit that inspired really working this model back up again, because it was clear we couldn't use something static to monitor it. Over here, so this line here is the volume in the dike. This line here, I think it's supposed to be red. I don't know if that's coming across, but that's the volume in the point source. And then there's a slip rate here on the Descolemont fault. So now we're in that green pause, and it's about to start coming back up again. And at first it started, so here we are under Mokuaweoweo. After 2018, it started up first with this sort of mid-crustal reinflation. Oh, the black dots are earthquakes, in case that wasn't clear. So earthquakes that are happening simultaneously. And then we started to see this really deep opening. And this deep opening would persist, and in fact would start to march up and up and up and up. And remember, the colors are opening rate. So even if it stays red, it means it's just continuing to open more and more. And as this started to push up, we started to see fingers going up. These two fingers correlated with very clear increases in seismicity. So where this was very steady, these seemed very clearly associated with increases in shallow earthquakes. And in particular, this one happened together with an increase in seismicity in September of 2022. And it was that increase in seismicity, which did not go down, it persisted until the eruption, as well as seeing this very clear evidence for everything getting shallower, that really put our antennas out that, it's really getting closer.
Okay, looking at the pre-eruption in September of 2022, the seismicity increased. And so we felt at that time, it seemed like Mauna Loa was reawakening. And so we took our show on the road to try and go out and inform the communities around the island about the potential impending eruption of Mauna Loa. And the place that we focused on was down here in the southwest side of the island. And the reason why we focused there is, if you look at this map, what we're looking at is transit times from when vents opened on the flanks high on the mountain and lava flows cascaded down into the ocean. So we're talking 3 hours, 14 hours, 18 hours. And we wanted these people to be aware that Mauna Loa could possibly reawaken. And because they had short response time, we wanted them to actually prepare. So that's where we focused our energy initially. And this picture just shows us out there in outreach, reaching out to the individuals. And my personal mantra, not the USGS mantra, for talking to these people down there was, if you see the glow, it's time to go. Okay, so this is a thermal camera and the summit, and it's looking out there, and the temperature bars are here. We're looking across Mokuaweoweo. This is to the southwest, and this is to the northeast to the left. And the fissure then cut from that southwestern part. Right here, you can see an increase in temperature that actually preceded the geophysical signatures by 2 minutes before the onset of the eruption. And the lava then migrated across the caldera there. And As the dikes opened up, we started to see that social media started to blow up because people in Kona started to send pictures. This is down here at Kailua Kona, and they're looking up and they see these fingers of lava coming, and everybody was all pretty much totally thinking that lava was descending upon where they live. And the case is that there have been other eruptions in these time periods shown here in the bottom that lava's been visible in this area. This is an area that's part of the South Caldera. The lava's cut across a high plateau. They are visible. There have been no eruptions in the historical period where lavas in this area have ever threatened where people live. So this is normal, even though people were quite, let's say, worried. Okay, so early in the morning after the eruption opened up, we got on the first flight. We flew up to the summit. You can see that our camera at 611 shows that there's still lava in the caldera. By the time we arrived 20 minutes later, that's what it looked like. It was already, all the fissures had shut off, and we couldn't see any incandescence in this area. We flew over to the South Caldera area to look for active fissures, as people were reporting the night before from Kona, and all of these in turn were also dead. And we couldn't find any incandescence, although we saw a lot of degassing. So you're looking up the Southwest Rift Zone, there's Mokuʻoveoveʻo. And then from there, we moved over to the Northeast Rift Zone. Looking at our webcams, we saw the earliest glow that I could identify, that I felt confident of something intruding into the Northeast Drift Zone, was about 0548. And then the fissures then opened up as in discrete members. By the time we got there, we saw 3 sets of fissures, and we saw the 4th one open up.
All right, and I'm going to rewind in time a little bit to talk about the same events, but with a geophysical angle. So now I'm rewinding us back until just before the eruption. And what you're looking at here is something called a spectrogram. So there are 6 instruments, 6 seismometers represented here. Each stripe is a seismometer. The thing to take away here is, prior to, this is 1124, this seismogram here, all of these through-going stripes are indicating earthquakes. So when an earthquake happens, you see this very clear pattern. This was as usual. And then at 1124, earthquakes started coming fast. And it was barely an hour later when the eruption onset happened. And within the geophysics, you can see that here. So you have these nice stripes, these, enhanced low frequency events. So you've got these nice earthquakes, and then you move into fuzz. And the fuzz is when you've entered eruptive tremor. So things are just going all the time. And that's very typical of once the lava is fountaining and pummeling the ground, you end up with, and you've got bubbly material moving through fissures. You end up in this no longer nice, discrete earthquakes, but eruptive tremor. So 10 years of warning, and then also 1 hour of warning. So all depending on how you look at things, it's either a lot or not very much at all. So on the deformation side, the instrument that we look at on this type of time scale is our tilt meters. And so this top panel here is the tilt meter I was showing earlier. It's up here near Mauna Loa summit. So this is spanning several hours on the day of the eruption. So as the earthquake started, so this line here shows, when there was these intense earthquakes, and we didn't really see much in the way of deformation until there was one biggish earthquake that seemed to really unlock the system. And so it waffled around for a little bit, but then at about 11 o'clock, we saw this clear increase in inflationary tilt. So this direction was indicating a fissure was opening And then eruption onset, we had a tiny bit more opening, but then pretty much turned right around. It did not take long after material started coming out onto the surface to switch from this fissure opening mode to deflation as the magma chamber started losing material. This bottom panel here is a tilt meter out here in the South Caldera area. So this tilt meter, we still haven't gotten a chance to go visit it. So I'm not actually sure its condition. You can see that it's right in these mapped fissure traces. And in fact, the eruptive fissure that came to the South Caldera came very close to where it's mapped. And I'll be very curious to see if in fact it got affected. MOK tilt meter was this first one that was very clear. And then as the hours went by, SLC started to really get going. And then, you know, this is going even more hours. This is going out until about 9 or 10 a.m. So MOK was doing a nice deflationary pattern, whereas SLC was ramping up and then eventually went off scale. So that's essentially, that's the limit of those tilt meters. So definitely had our eye on that South Caldera. The direction of motion was not consistent with anything moving towards, you know, downwards down the Southwest Rift. The direction of motion did seem like whatever was happening to the west of that instrument. But you know, ultimately, this was the instrument that showed the highest amount of deformation, not the one that was right at the summit. But it may be because it was unfairly very close. So this is a very preliminary model. I don't have the same run-up as the other one, but it's following the same basics. But so this now, instead of being, you know, going over several years, this is going over about 2 days. And so this is using the GPS data at a much shorter time spacing than we usually do. And so there's a couple things. This is, like I say, it's very preliminary. You'll notice that here's the ground surface. It goes off into the air. That's not usually something you want from your model. So these are all things that are going to have to get changed in the future. But I'm really excited about it, so I did want to show it. It goes by really fast, but then I'll go backwards. So don't pay too close attention to the time that's in the corner, but this is the timestamp of the model. As we get started, we see that very clear, you know, here's Makua Veoveo. So this is that very clear fissure opening right underneath where the eruption occurred. And then when we step through, we see it sort of move into 2 pieces, and one heads off to the southwest and the other heads down to the northeast. So now we're in this situation here. This is maybe feeding into that southern summit fissure that erupted for a little while, whereas this sort of blob, this fissure, this is indicating opening of the rift, which then allowed the eventual eruptive fissures to open and become the sources. I'll play it at full speed one more time. Goes by very quickly.
Okay, so now we have fissures opened up on the Northeast Rift Zone, and the geologists go out and start to gather the data. So we went out and we did some lava flow sampling. We had a UAS also out there looking at channels over time to look at velocities and the morphology. We had thermal images, airborne mapping, and not only did we watch flow field development, we also looked at channel development and also monitored the flow front, because the flow front possibly could impact the saddle road. We also set up these web cameras, and those of you later on during the eruption noted that we also had a real-time camera out there where people could go and stream that and look at the streaming data. And when we use cameras like this to look at eruption dynamics and see fountain heights and what that how that relates to the seismicity and the flux, how much lava is coming out at time. And when the weather wasn't so good, we also had a secondary way of keeping track of the flow field and how it advanced, because sometimes the weather wasn't great. So one of the things that we do with the lava samples is that we go out and we look at the chemistry, and the chemistry can give us ideas about the source of the magma, how long the magma has been stored, whether or not that magma is a mixed magma. We can calculate the temperature. And those are some of the things that we can do with the lava chemistry. So here we are, we're collecting a sample of lava and then we quench it. So we take those quench samples and we make a series of chemical plots. We use, in this case, we're using calcium oxide and magnesium oxide as a proxy for the lava, what we're looking at. And this is their concentrations. And you can see that over the course of the eruption, these yellow dots represent all the samples that we collected. So it's spatially well defined, and we got stuff that goes down the flow field. And the surprising thing is it's uniform. Right? This is time over here, and you look at the chemistry, it's uniform. And we thought, well, you know, after 38 years, we would hope that we would see something different, especially with different pulses that we tracked that Ingrid talked about. And yet it was surprisingly uniform. Now, we also was able to take some of this data and do it in near real time in Hilo. And then we could look at the sampling, because that might inform us if the temperature is going up, maybe the lava is more fluid. And therefore the flow front would advance more quickly towards the saddle road. But then we also were able to do physical parameters on the lava, and you can use that to put that into lava flow models. Okay, so the chemistry itself was fairly, I don't want to use the word boring, but unremarkable. How's that? It was unremarkable, except when we started to dig deeper, we took a trash can sized barrel of cinder and we crushed that all the way down to sand sized grains looking for olivine, because when we got the samples and we look at hand specimen, we saw no minerals. Then you take that tephra, you crushed it all, and you got olivine grains like this, and you can see they're small, about 1 millimeter. And these actually tell an entirely different story. So these olivines right here are very primitive. The lava that we collected, the whole rock analyses, is indicative of lava that's been stored for the 38 some odd years. And these lavas say, no, this is a very juvenile thing that came. And when we calculate we look at the inclusion data, we can actually get a pressure calculation from these olivine, and they can tell us different areas within the subsurface that they equilibrated with. So we're looking at very shallow storage, like Ingrid said, and then we go down to these areas as far down as 5 kilometers. And we're looking at the seismic data over here to inform us where the magma chambers might be. And over here is a stylized cartoon of how these olivines that have these very deep signatures moved up in the system, re-equilibrated, and then finally were erupted. Now, some of these olivines spent very little time. And so what we're looking over here is duration of time. And we analyze the olivine. We actually look at their profiles from the core to the rim. And we look at diffusion models to calculate residence time. So this suggests that the bulk of the olivine were perturbed in the time frame about September, when we thought lava was stirring, that something was in the system, as Ingrid's models are suggestive of this. And that all is starting to unfold and link together how these things are overlapping for us to forecast an impending eruption. The other thing that was a novel thing that was broken out during this eruption is the fact that there was this lava 2D model This model would use the physical parameters, the temperature, the vesicularity, the crystallinity, to then run down slope and calculate where the flow would be at a future point in time. So this model is projecting out for 2 weeks in time how far the lava would have advanced. And this model basically said that they would never reach the Saddle Road area because flow was cooling more than it was advancing, and therefore it just kind of would freeze in place. Okay, how does this eruption compare to the 19th and 20th century flows for which people were here that actually documented eruptions? We're looking at the duration was 13 days for 2022. And if we look at other flows in this 20th, 19th, and 20th century, we're looking at flows that have median and mode values right in the ballpark of what happened in 2022. We look at the area covered, we're basically in the ballpark. And if we look at the volumes, we're about 10, 12% of what those values were for that historical period. So what does that say? The 2022 flow was ordinary. Okay, taking a longer term perspective by using a geologic mapping, what did prehistoric lava flows tell us? Well, I've taken the Northeast Rift Zone and broke it down into segments. This is the upper, this is the middle, and this would be the lower. The fissure system right here, this red lava flow here is the 2022 lava flow. And we're looking at, this would be the mode, these great circles. This would be the average, and this would be the median values. The prehistoric lava flows told us exactly what the model told us. Very unlikely that that flow would have hit the Saddle Road. But I want to point out that you see this great circle out here? That is one of the outliers in the prehistoric period where lava flows can reach all the way down to Hilo. The frequency at which this happens is about one flow every 1,000 years. Okay, not to leave out some of our other colleagues who aren't here presenting with us, this is their gas data. We're looking at the gas in kilotons. So in 2018, there was about 200 kilotons per day. The Mauna Loa system, the fissure opens up, it starts about 200 kilotons. As the fissures propagate away from the summit, both sides of the Southwest Rift Zone, Northeast Rift Zone, that number goes up to about 500 kilotons. As the fissures die along the Northeast Rift Zone and Fissure 3 becomes a dominant source, it goes quasi steady state and then dramatically drops off towards the end of the eruption, coincident with the RSAM values. So in this plot, we're looking at RSAM. So just think of seismic shaking. So the bigger the values here, we're looking at the more intense the shaking. So this is a sort of a pictograph of here's the summit phase opens up. We have these fountains. Eventually, as both sides of the rift zone join the summit in activity, we have this big peak here. Fissure 3 takes over. We go quasi steady state. And then the RSAM dropped off dramatically. And as the RSAM dropped, so did the lava production. And then eventually the eruption ended. So there were a lot of successes. We were able to call the start of the eruption. We went out early to message to the public to say that Mauna Loa was getting ready to erupt. We have great data set of things that we collected in the field. We had real-time data sharing with our partners, and there will be a journal that will feature a lot of people's independent research on what we found during the Mauna Loa eruption. And so there are more discoveries to come. And as I say, that the material presented here is not only mine, but a whole plethora of people at UHH, at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, and then, of course, we want to mahalo our partners. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good talk.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting to see the build-up phase, especially, I thought, right? Those models, I think, are the most interesting thing to me. To
Get to see a little bit on the inside of what they were seeing as well, because the public data that we get is only a snapshot of what they have in-house at any given moment.
Right. So if we had seen that model right in September and October, we would have been behaving exactly the same way, I'm sure, right? Because, you know, it's just a matter of, the thing is as a government agency, everything they release goes through this entire vetting process, right? And so, like, we've seen this with the release of map layers, a lot of flow shapes, all of that. There's a certain protocol they have to follow. So that makes it tricky for them to share that. And so it didn't happen in 2022. We can hope for different in the future.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
The one that was always funny to me is when we did it with Brian Shiro, the interview with him. And it's like, no, we can't give you the slides, but you can video the tablet of the slides being shown on, in Brian's hand. It's
right.
Like, workarounds, they're required for, trying to get something out fast, essentially. Those quick turnaround times with the USGS.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just a little first taste of Mauna Loa. There, we'll cover Mauna Loa, and as far as how we covered it more during eruption later on in this month, as we approach the anniversary and into next month as well. Next week will be the anniversary of the Kilauea eruption, so we will shift gears to that, and then we'll continue on from there with
one of the most popular places in the park that we've really not done all that much about. I mean, we've talked about, the main thing we talk about with Iki is the drilling of it, and I think we actually have video of that, to show.
Yeah, so that's the idea. We'll pull out some old video of that, and we will have a little bit of a reaction to that there. So yeah, that'll be next week, you guys. So anything else, Dane?
Lou? I think that's it. Until next week.
So yeah, mahalo, you guys. Thank you guys so much for helping us get a great start to our fundraising campaign here. That was awesome. I appreciate all you guys who are tuned in here to the end. And from our nonprofit, Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, or HVERI, we got Dane DuPont, we got Lou in the back end. I'm Philip Ong. Until next week, aloha, everyone.